it was all about, okay, there we go. It's all about getting the, getting access and affordable access to solar opportunities, whether you do it on your own house, whether you do it at your church, your library, your school. We want you to have the opportunity to get a slice of solar. All right, where's my, should I share screen?
Your column's below.
Oh, I'm down here, okay. And I did share the screen already. Can you guys at home see the screen?
Well, that would be, I think you're good.
He's saying no. Saying no. Yeah.
Oh,
No, so I actually do have to share the screen, so let me do that. So I'll just do this one because that's the one following. Oh, and then that's, but that's the one that you can see. Okay, so see me, I'll just get myself out of the way there. And this should be your screen, isn't it?
Mhm.
All right, my apologies. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to reshare, but just on the one screen that I have control over. I'm used to doing this myself, so there. Okay, is that right? Did I do it right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think some of that stuff we'll get out of the way in a second. Anyway, so a slice of sun is what we're talking about, and with the co-op, today's topics for discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about the co-op itself. We're going to talk about group buy. What is a solar group buy? We'll talk a little bit about the technology. What is solar technology? What is, what's the difference between a solar cell and a solar array, that sort of thing. Just, basic information. Financing. So here we are, we're in the basement of Dane County Credit Union in a financial institution. We're going to talk a little bit about financing. So no surprise. SRECs, what the heck is that? So solar renewable energy certificates. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll have a little call to action. Join us to bring power to the people. And you'll see this at the end of our presentation today, but I'm going to give it, it's always good. I used to be a high school science teacher, so it's always good to kind of give your audience a little preview of what, what we're going to, like what's going to be on the test. So here, what's going to be on the test are these items here. So we're going to talk about membership. These are the potential action steps that you could take. You could become a member. You could become an internal champion. We'll talk a little bit about what that is for a solar project. You can join a solar group buy for your own house or your own business. You can subscribe to RECs. You can purchase bonds, become a tax sponsor, and collaborate with the co-op. So these are all action items that you can, if you're interested, if what we are talking about today resonates with you in some way, one or more of these actions could be available to you. What is Legacy Solar Co-op? We're a Wisconsin-based member-owned cooperative. Basically, that means everybody who is a member is also an owner, and there's no one owner that owns more than anybody else, except by virtue of the class. You're either a family, residential, lifetime member, or you're an institution like a business or a library or a government entity institution member. And so those are the two types of membership. Our goal in the work that we do is to bring people together in support of solar and green energy initiatives. It's not all about just solar. It's about clean energy initiatives, which could include the array of renewable energy options, but it could also and should also include considerations and implementation for energy efficiency. If you can say, the kilowatt hour that you don't use is the least expensive kilowatt hour available. And our mission of our co-op is to improve access and affordability to solar and other clean energy technologies. So far, you've heard word membership already. I mean, we're a member organization, just like the credit union is a member organization here. So you can, become a member. One of the other offerings we have is tax financing for community solar projects. We'll go into that in a little bit. Once you're a member of the co-op, the Chapter 185 that governs cooperatives in the state of Wisconsin allows for co-ops to raise money from their membership through the issuance of solar bonds. So you can buy solar bonds as little as $250 at a pop, and that'll help support solar projects that we invest directly into solar projects. You can take advantage of group buys and solar reps. So again, these are a few terms that you're going to see again in a few minutes. What is tax financing? I'm going to talk about tax financing in about 6 minutes. So I give you a little head start. Basically, you've got a church, a library, or school like this entity on the right here that develops solar. We team up with a tax sponsor. That's someone who can afford to help pay for the project up front and take responsibility for the operation and maintenance of that project in exchange for using some of the tax benefits. And then the co-op is anyone else who wants to support the project can do so by becoming a member of the co-op, buying bonds, and then the co-op makes a loan to that project LLC. 6 years later, after the IRS has been satisfied that we've jumped through all of their hoops, then the on-site, the host site community solar can be owned, by that landlord. So we'll talk about that later. Origin stories. Now, where did the co-op come from? How did we come to be? Well, it started out in about 2011, 2012. First, when we were trying to crack that nut, the biggest barrier for solar is the price. It's so expensive, right? And essentially what you're doing is you're paying for 25 years of electricity upfront. It's less expensive per kilowatt hour than you're paying currently, but you're having to do that all upfront. And so the easiest way to do that is to break it into pieces that are more affordable to pay as you go, to allow the energy savings that come from the solar project to pay back the folks who have helped to finance it. So we used to do a peer-to-peer program, friends and neighbors. It's basically matchmaking. We find people who want to do solar, but they can't do it on their own house because they have too much shading or the roof isn't appropriate for it or whatever. And those folks can help put solar on their neighbor's house or down the street and make a loan to that person, and then they get a tax credit, pay back the neighbor. So it's kind of a loan program. So instead of doing that, which is just onesies, one at a time, we decided we'd go a little bit bigger, try to figure out a system that would work universally throughout the state of Wisconsin and allow you to do a project in any utility district, and you wouldn't be subject to the idiosyncratic rules that come with each utility. So we decided we would form a cooperative. And so we incorporated in 2014, allowed basically more democratization of solar investing. If you can't do solar on your own house, you can put solar on a church, a library, or a school in your neighborhood, and help green your community that way. In 2015, we started to issue solar bonds. So to date, we have over $1 million in solar bonds that we've issued to our members. But we started out $250 a piece, and that's still $250 for an individual bond. And the co-op members in 2015 helped capitalize a loan fund that we used to make loans to our first few projects. 2016, we started working on solar projects with community institutions, including cities, co-ops, and churches. 2017, we expanded that to libraries. I think I have a picture somewhere in here where we actually did a library up in Merrill, Wisconsin, and then a couple of farms all over different parts of the state. In 2018, we expanded to nonprofits like humane societies, DFWs, and hockey rinks. In 2019, we started a new program, which is to basically, when you talk about getting utility power, you just plug into the wall and the power comes from the utility company. More than half of that power, it comes from fossil fuels, emits a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, other irritants that can cause health problems like asthma. So to offset your electricity use, you can subscribe to solar recs. And Elise will talk about that in a few minutes. That was 2019. And then in 2020, we started our very first solar group buy, which is basically the power of a group purchasing power with respect to residential. So you can subscribe to a group buy and get a lower price point for your solar because we're doing 50 or 100 houses instead of just your own. And then this year, our stats so far are that we have, I think we're even over 238 members. We may have close to 240 members at this point. We have 7 staff members, 3 of which are present today. You'll meet them. And over 4,500 kilowatts. That's 4.5 million watts of solar that we've developed all over the state of Wisconsin. So that's a little bit about the origin story. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how electricity works in the markets. Basically, you've heard of the grid, right? So the electrical grid. And there are a lot of junction points across the United States where the grid is more or less susceptible to brownouts or blackouts. We are actually in this blue area here. And even though it says Eastern Interconnection area, our specific area is MISO. That's Midwest Interstate Organization for solar or for electricity. So it's about 5 or 6 states in the Midwest. Out west, they have separate connection. Obviously, there's a separate connection in, well, I don't know if it's obvious. It is obvious now because earlier this year, Texas was kind of cut off from the rest of the country and they kind of had their own problems. So you can see, there are vulnerabilities in the system. Grid sources are usually coal or natural gas, which is the same thing as methane. If you've ever heard of what methane is, that's CH4, 1 carbon atom, 4 hydrogen atom. See, my high school chemistry teacher is coming out now. So methane, natural gas is a clean burning gas, but if you don't burn it, it's 20 times more than 20 times the global or greenhouse gas potential as carbon dioxide. So it's not the greatest, but it's there. It's a little cleaner than coal. And then in the US, over 28% or about 28% of our greenhouse gas emissions are from electricity use. Others obviously would be from transportation. So driving here and there or taking a plane, those things account for a lot. The power grid transmits electrical energy. Usually it's over long distances. So you could have a power plant that is a nuclear power plant that could supply an entire state, but you have to get the power to where the people are. And so you have transmission lines, and then when you get to the local power lines, they don't call them transmission lines anymore, they call them distribution lines. But the cheapest and the easiest way and the most efficient way to take care of most of your electrical use is if you generate that electricity closer to where you're using it. So we call this behind the meter. So if you put solar on your house, it's behind the electrical meter and you can generate electricity, use it in your house, and anything that you don't use, you can export to your neighbors. Basically, you export it through your meter turns backwards, gives you a credit on your next bill, and then your neighbors would be using your solar electricity. So it's a nice system. Okay, I see that I made this map a little wide. Maybe it's because we eat too much cheese in Wisconsin, I don't know. But this is just where the pins fall all over the map for solar projects that we've worked on. A number of them up north, number of them, as you can see, in and around Dane County, and also a few in the Milwaukee area. I think this is a repeat. So I'm just going to go through that. There we go. Now Peter is going to talk a little bit about more terms so you understand better about how solar works.
Question.
Use this mouse here. Yes.
I assume you are a nonprofit, is that correct?
That is not correct. That is a misconception. Cooperatives have some tax advantages and that a cooperative in the state of Wisconsin does not pay state income tax, but we still have to pay federal income tax.
So are you a corporation then?
We're a corporation. Yep.
Yeah, C corporation,
No, we're a cooperative.
cooperative corporation?
Yep.
Another question I have is, are you, you sell this, are you competitive to the private sector then?
This is the private, we're in the
You are
private
in
sector.
Private sector.
Yep.
So you're one of the 16 people who sell solar products.
16 people who
Yeah,
sell solar
in
products.
this area, according to Google, there's 16 of
Oh,
businesses
I see
that
what you're
sell
saying. There are
solar-
vendors who,
You're not a vendor?
well, if you listen, you'll learn more about what we do.
Okay, I guess the point I'm getting
Okay.
at is that if we have 16 solar product companies, you're one of them who sell.
You're a we
private
sell
company
service.
as opposed to a sole proprietor who has his own business and everything like Wisconsin Solar.
Right, we're not a sole proprietorship.
Okay,
Right,
so
we're a cooperative.
Wisconsin Solar would be different than you. You're all cooperative.
We're cooperative, owned by the members.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you might have more questions later, and
Sure.
maybe some of them will be answered. Peter will speak next. Thank you.
Yes. So going into these up. So solar panels are made out of solar cells. Cells are made out of silicon, and you also other materials that aid in the capacity of the solar cell. Basically light particles, photons hit the cell, they jump from one side to the other. These electrons flow into a circuit and electricity is made. There can be up to 96 cells per panel or module. There's monocrystalline cells that are basically one piece of silicon, and there are polycrystalline cells that are made up of many pieces. Monocrystalline cells are more efficient, and a lot of installers use those. The panels are what hold all those cells together, made out of tempered glass, so even a hailstorm will not typically damage a solar array. They're made out of aluminum, so they're relatively lightweight, still about 30 pounds per panel, about 2.5 pounds per square foot on your roof. So there are tests that have to be done to make sure that your roof can support these panels. And these panels and cells can last up to 25, they're warranted up to 25 years. They can last up to 30, 40 plus years. I've seen a system that was very small, installed in the late 70s, that's still running a radio and a few lights. So they're still out there running. The array is naturally all the panels into a configuration. And that can be on a rooftop, on the ground, on a solar pergola, an awning, a carport, any surface that can be connected to the electric meter. And then we've got solar inverters. So there are string inverters. They will only produce as much energy as the least productive panel. So if there's shading that occurs, that system will shut off. There are also microinverters that I will have on my roof because I have trees all around. And if, as the sun moves, one system will be less productive, part of the system will be more productive. So that allows for more flexibility in terms of shading and with multiple arrays being on different planes of the roof. Then you have grid tied. So basically you're connected to MG&E, you're connected to line energy still. Like Kurt was saying, you're feeding your excess energy to the grid. In the warmer months, you're drawing energy from the grid. In the colder months, or depending on your electricity use, your meter actually does spin backwards when you're feeding electricity to the grid. You can also have a battery ready system that some customers do if they're not quite ready to go off off-grid if you have that option. It's the installation of an additional inverter, basically. And then there's off-grid. So that's like solar 204 or whatever the class would be called. It's I don't believe in the city of Madison you can be off-grid. You can obviously if you're in a rural area, that's when people start looking for off-grid. It is a significant increase in cost, though. So, I'm the group buy coordinator at Legacy Solar Co-op. So this is what I do every day. I coordinate a statewide set of programs that look different in every community. There's one in Dane County, there's Iowa County, Fox Valley, and in the Northwoods. So basically, we work with the installer to come up with a price, installer or multiple installers to come up with a cost per watt, typically, to attempt to lower the cost for a limited amount of time to urge people to act on solar. And that cost may be adjusted over time as supply costs tend to go up. Benefits, save on system costs. We teach people, we meet one-on-one with people. We meet like in this group to talk a little bit about the economies of scale that happen through a group buy. We walk through numbers with people, make sure that they know what a system would cost if it's 100% of their electricity use, if it's 60%, depending on their budget. We connect people if they're in need of financing. We have a financial option, a group called Green Penny, which is an online carbon neutral bank based in the Midwest. And then we also have a group that we work with that if you're already working on energy efficiency products, that we can connect you to them as well. They're called Green Homeowners United. So that's kind of hitting on the accessibility piece. It's not just hand the installer $25,000 or however much your system costs. There are loan options, there are other financial options. So, and then we let you know the cost broken down by month, cost savings. So it starts off with a large number potentially, but it's more tangible as you work through the details. So in Dane County, we have Full Spectrum Solar and Midwest Solar Power, who we're working with. We went through an RFP process to select these installers based on factors like customer service and their workmanship, their experience, the materials they use.
And price.
And the price, thank you. Not to mention the price. So informational sessions like this, we obviously want to spread the word. We want to let people know that we're there to help them. That's back to that accessibility piece, accessibility of information. Not everyone knows where they fall in terms of solar. They might be less expensive than they thought. And then finally, what I spend a fair bit of time on is creating you, the customer, a report, a 2 to 3 page report on where they land as far as, and I'll show you a sample in a little bit here, a breakdown of the cost, the rebates that you're eligible for, the savings average monthly, and the payback. And then once you're done with questions, once you've answered everything, we can meet with you multiple times. Then we bring in the installer. They already know about your site because we've informed them about what we've talked about, and they're ready to go and ready to take precise measurements. And that's, I guess, the installer right there. And they, of course, they verify details. We give a broad picture of what your system might look like. They give the exact panels will go in this 30-foot section. And they stand behind the cost that we've predetermined with them. And you're scheduled for your installation. That's kind of the process from emailing us your initial form, with your electricity bill information and a few pictures, to scheduling your solar installation, typically taking about 2 to 3 months these days.
Can I just ask you about the 2 to 3 months? Are you talking about currently with the group buy? Is that, yeah, right now, it sounds like, from what I've heard, and this is Kurt, by the way, I know I'm not on the video, that for the Dane County group buy right now, if you still want to get involved, you can, but it's likely that if you sign a contract in the next month, they'll probably get your solar installed by November, also by like Thanksgiving, because it's getting pretty busy. And so if you do want to do this Dane County group buy, time is of the essence for 2021.
Right, there's a little bit of a lag between when the installers would ideally, they have time to install. People are still thinking about it. It's obviously a long-term decision for people. So there's a little bit of a crunch time at the end of the year that Chris mentioned, referring to. We take into account the shading. This is in our measurements. You may think that your lot is too shaded. It actually may not be. Obviously, if you have no trees, you're in a south-facing roof, you're in the best possible place that you can be. But it's worth getting assessed. It's worth seeing where you come in. It might be a better picture than you thought. So basically, yeah, we look at how many solar panels according to the amount of kilowatts, system size. Whatever we propose, you don't have to go with that size. You can go smaller, you can go larger. It's just a snapshot of what's possible. We ask for information like your roof structure, your electric box, how full your electric panel is. We may determine that you might need a sub panel. You may not know if you want a roof or a ground mount. You may only have option to do a roof mount if you're in the city. You may just not know. Your roof might be 20 years old. We might guide you to a ground mount unless you're already thinking about a roof replacement, for instance. So a lot of factors. And then your panel. So if your panel is full, all the slots are full, that may be a point where we look at a sub panel. If you have a smaller amperage, it might be an upgrade to 200 amps. And then your electrical meter. And then based on all that, we give you a budgetary quote of range of about $3,000. And along the way, anytime we can meet with you online. And this is kind of what it looks like. This is me. This is even my house. And so we give you a sense of what's the capacity of the system, how much do you use? We try and get a good average of 2 years to just so you really know how much you're using. We take into account, are you buying a Tesla? Are you thinking about an electric car? Are you going all electric house? And basically this blue is my energy use. The orange is the system energy use. And then we break it down by average monthly savings, your federal tax credit, which you can see there is a significant amount, 26% through the end of next year. And then focus on energy factors in there too. And then you can see the savings of the whole lifetime of the system is in the tens of thousands pretty much all the time. It's just how many tens of thousands will you save?
So on the cash transaction, it was about a 12 to 14 year return.
Yeah, this is my particular, when Full Spectrum Solar came in, they actually calculated it was 11.8, so a little bit better than I was anticipating.
And that's with a fair amount of shading. I think in general, if you've got a good roof for solar, you'll see a payback somewhere between 7 and 9 years, and it might be 10 or 11 years, depending on if you had to pay for an electrical upgrade because you had an older system or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, somewhere between 5 and 10, if you want to be loose about it, but closer to 10 and more cases than not.
And I won't say my house is the worst case scenario, but it looks like a lot of shade and there is, but I do have a perfect window where the sun moves.
But you really, really want solar.
I really
so
do.
We're gonna make it work, and you're still gonna get a financial return on investment. It's just gonna take a little longer.
Mhm.
The other thing I would say is that the cost include you factor that in is the 26% tax credit, which, as Peter said, will start to sundown after next year. But when you factor in all of the incentives, and if you're going to pay cash versus a loan, your return on investment is probably going to be somewhere between 4 and 7%. And this equipment will last 25 years for the most part. So it's or more. So it's more of about the legacy of the long-term savings, even though it's up against everything else in your life that you want to buy, whether it's a car or a camper or that super jazzy camper van that you saw. So it's just one of many priorities that people have.
Right. Chad.
Question again, I'm a little confused. You are a private firm selling this product, and let's assume in your particular case, you have a $25,000 sale, or that's your cost. I mean, that's total cost of the project.
Yeah.
Right. So, my question is that a normal person would be able to say, well, I got, my budget is $25,000 and come to this firm and give me a quote. Let's say that I'm an owner of a church, a nonprofit, and we have in our budget 25 and 50,000 in the budget for a solar system. As a private business person or nonprofit, do they come to you? And you mentioned sort of costs. I'm looking at some hard costs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm sneaking in here because
It's the
it
perfect
sounds
transitional question.
the
Actually.
perfect transitional question. Yeah. So I'm going to talk for just another couple of minutes to answer your question, because what we're talking about now, we have group buy, but we have tax financing. We're going to come back to tax financing. Churches, that's where, we've helped over 12 to 15, somewhere between 12 and 15 different houses of faith put solar up. And basically what we do is we help combine, hold on a second. So yeah, the solar project's 25 to 40 years. Okay, here's our example. Okay, so the best way to talk about how a church could afford solar is to run through an example. And so let's say this is a church. Could be a library, a school. It could be another nonprofit. It could be a farm. Tax financing allows for the host site to install solar with minimal cost up front, but you have options to buy out the system later on. So it's kind of like a lease to own system.
Okay, so they don't purchase it, they lease to own.
Lease to own.
Okay.
It's similar to a lease to own. It's not officially a lease to own, but that's the easiest way for me to describe it.
Oh, okay.
And so there are three components in tax financing. There's the host site. And then second, you have a tax sponsor. That's a person or a company that can provide some tax equity. And tax equity is simply money that they would have spent on their taxes, but they've decided that they want to pay for a solar array on your church rather than paying all of their tax bill to the federal government. Okay. And what happens is that you have a relationship, you have a contractual relationship, a service contract between the tax sponsor and the host site. Once the solar is installed, by the way, the tax sponsor will lease the roof space from the church. And that tax sponsor could even be someone from the congregation or someone from the neighborhood who just owes more in taxes than what they're going to get back in the tax credit. So This is how it works, is that you have a service contract for at least 5 tax years, because the IRS says, if you're going to take that tax credit, you have to maintain ownership yourself. The original owner has to own it for at least 5 tax years. And then the RECs come into play. Rather than selling electricity, we're actually going to be selling you the solar RECs. What does that mean? It's just basically a legal way for us to supply a service without blatantly acting like a public utility. And then the co-op role in all of this is that we help to educate the stakeholders so that the church or the grounds and facility committee, the pastors and all the decision makers, all the stakeholders of the church understand what's involved with tax financing and what the contract looks like between the potential tax sponsor who could be paying for the project. But then the co-op can also supply financing. Some or all of the project cost, usually not all, usually it's 50% or less of the financing comes from the co-op. And where does the co-op get its money? Well, we sell bonds to members who want to support solar in their neighborhood or anywhere else in the state of Wisconsin. And in fact, the host site itself can become a member and can invest in its own project through the co-op. So there's lots of ways that you can, achieve your end result, which is to pay for the expensive solar project. But once you garner the tax credit and depreciation, and over 5 or 6 tax years, the amount of energy that you will be removing from your monthly electric bills will pay for the loan payments. And after 5 or 6 years, you can arrange a fair market value buyout between the not-for-profit and the for-profit, and you end up saving 20 to 40% overall in that process. So you have to jump through a lot of hoops, but we've done this about 35 times in Wisconsin, a lot of churches right here in Dane County. And so tax financing basically saves money. You have to jump through a number of hoops, but you can save the church, you can save the library or the school or other community institution that considerable upfront expense. You can get your solar installed and pay the same or less for the same amount of electricity. Now, more of your electricity is going to be solar electricity instead of the grid power for the first 6 to 12 years. You can buy out the system at any point along the way. The best time to buy it out is in year 6, because as soon as the sooner you get control of your local ownership of your solar array, the quicker you're going to be able to pocket savings and have a bigger legacy value. But for that nonprofit, the nice thing about the tax code, which can be pretty convoluted at times, but the nice thing about the tax code is that you cannot compel the nonprofit to ever buy out the system. It's an option. So the nonprofit is in the driver's seat with respect to this contract. And because of that, and because there's very little financial risk up front, there's really low risk for the community institution. Most of the risk is on that tax entity, the individual who has to be at risk. In fact, in order to qualify for that tax credit, they have to be at risk for that investment. But, so we've been talking about solar on your home. We've been talking about solar on a community institution in your community. But if solar does not meet all of your energy conservation needs, you can always buy solar renewable energy certificates to clean up your energy diet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise Coulier, who is our coordinator for the SREC program called Switch to Solar. Elise.
Thank you, Kurt. Alrighty, so we touched on it a little bit, those solar renewable energy certificates. And Kurt introduced them a bit when you saw the model of it going back between the tax sponsorship there. And I might also, but the screen is over there now, or can I see it on here? I was gonna go back to the house example, but that's okay. So if you remember the little house example that Peter went through, where there was an energy coming from the transformer, it was moving into the house and through the inverter, things like that. So if we were to be able to look at the electrons traveling in these lights right now, we can't tell a coal electron from a solar electron, right? So a solar renewable certificate is helping track that renewable energy. And so the program that is S2S allows us to sell these renewable energy certificates to our subscribers. They're retired on behalf of the buyer, and that's part of this accessibility aspect to transitioning our grid and our reliance on fossil fuels to sources that are renewable, like solar. Okay, perfect. So I mentioned that these certificates help track solar electricity, and that one certificate is representative of 1,000 kilowatt hours of solar power. So any of those churches, libraries, schools, they're all generating RECs right now. Your home would be generating RECs if you install a system on your home. So the certificates are reported, verified, and registered through us. And we also check the on-site meter, and we double check the interconnection agreement with the installer. So that's a pretty normal system in which they're verified by 3 different entities. So the subscribers of S2S pay to declare the electricity offsets for their home or business. So there's kind of a couple different avenues to this, and I'll talk about that in the options. And so one of them is people are interested in their home of offsetting their electricity use from fossil fuels to a solar source. But we also are reaching out to corporations, entities, right now a housing cooperative that is interested in having more carbon neutral initiatives. So they're trying to meet a sustainability goal, and they can use SRECs and the fact that there's no carbon emissions associated with solar to do that.
And it's local.
And it's local.
Buy local.
There you go.
Yeah, so like Kurt mentioned, all of our solar is produced here in Wisconsin. We buy the certificates from City of Monona is an example. Driftless Area Land Conservancy is another producer. So those that are harnessing solar right here in Wisconsin, we're purchasing the solar renewable certificates from them. So if you visited our website and you wanted to subscribe today, you'd see options like this. The home and personal use looks like what your home would consume monthly. So if you take a look at your bill, you would see usually between that 250 kilowatt hours and 1,250 kilowatt hours is within the range of what most homes are using. So you select whichever one is closest to your use amount. I also touched on initiatives to address carbon footprints and carbon emissions. So that would be the center one. If you want to look into and counter the carbon from a long drive that you're taking, a flight, something like that, that would be that secondary option there. Or if you want to customize something larger, a wedding, you're looking at the emissions associated with that. We've done Renew Wisconsin's energy summits. When they know that people are coming in from all across, they can offset some of that, those carbon emissions that are associated with that transport and that lodging. They bought some solar renewable certificates to offset that through S2S. So we wanted to talk about this today because usually residents are less involved in the REC and the SREC economy. It's a tradable market, but it's a very small market here in Wisconsin. And part of that is because utilities often want consumers to think that our energy system is complicated and hard. If any of you have spent considerable amount of time looking at your electrical bill, I'd be shocked, because most people, when someone is asking them how many kilowatt hours, they're like, I know how much it costs, but I don't know much more than that. But it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. And that's part of why we're here, is explaining this system a little bit better, and helping people to realize that countering our carbon and addressing the carbon emissions, especially that our country has, which is higher than most other countries, it's certainly achievable for us to start dampening those carbon emissions. So Legacy Solar Co-op is advising and providing advocacy for these solar movements and these solar resources. And RECs are an option that if you don't own your home, solar installations are a few years away, you have those shady lots, you can still become involved in this program and involved in the system of divesting away from fossil fuels and investing into renewables like solar through a program like this. So with that, Kurt mentioned our call to actions before. So if you visited our website, one of the first things to do to become connected, get involved with others is become a member. Join us. You'll get our newsletter with all of our updates, what is happening in the community, what projects might need help, things like that. You could become an internal champion. Kurt mentioned that before. So a lot of times those tax sponsors are within the church entities that we're working with. They're within the humane societies. You know, they've been big donors of those organizations before. And so those internal champions are really important, as well as green teams. You know, does your organization, your service volunteer group, wherever it is that you're with, if they don't have a green team, you know, consider getting one started, and we'd be happy to help you with that too. We all need to be talking about these topics and helping people feel like there's something they can do about it, and not just that it's this, you know, heavy weight that's sitting on all of us, right? You can join one of Peter's solar group buys, or you could ask your neighbors if they're interested in getting one started right close in town, and subscribe to the RECs is something that you can do. You can purchase bonds, you can become a tax sponsor. So all of the things we've been talking about today. You can also, if you're a business and you can offer rewards, discounts, anything through your program. Our S2S program and our membership, we're looking for ways to collaborate with other businesses here in Dane County, across Wisconsin. So you can talk to me afterwards. I have some sheets about what that might look like, what type of discounts we're looking for, perks, rewards, things like that. And so we're just looking to connect more people, connect these groups that are all interested in these initiatives and getting things really moving in the state.
And you can't get this at home. I mean, I can't put it through the video, but yeah, so we have a brochure. You can get onto our website. I think what at this point we should probably do is like, how can you contact us, right? So I'm going to hand this one to you. If you have any questions, there's a number on the back, and I can talk with you afterwards. But also, let's see. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
So Legacy Solar Co-op, and usually when you think of writing out the word co-op, you put a little hyphen in there. But for our URL, for our website, it's just legacysolarcoop.org. And then you can email info@ or Peter for the group buy. And we don't have Elisa's number up there, but it's, I'm Kurt. That's me. Peter, you saw earlier, Elise. So just our first name at legacysolarcoop.org. So I think, is this questions? It's time for questions.
Yep,
So
yep.
any other questions?
Now I understand.
Oh, good. How about online? Any questions from our virtual attendees? Not yet. Okay, well, we'll hold on for a second.
So,
Yes.
tax sponsors.
Yes, tax sponsors.
All right,
Yes.
so I understand that, how that fits together. Do you have a list of tax sponsor prospects out there, or is it something that you
I do.
find?
I have a Rolodex right here. People who have talked to me, I write down their name, or, you know, usually they're folks who have a long-standing relationship with, or people who just say, hey, I heard that I could help put solar on my son or daughter's school, and I want to find out how I can do that. And so that person could either be an internal champion, someone who knows people within the school district, or who maybe even sits on the school board, who knows? Or they could be a tax sponsor to help basically facilitate the funding for a tax equity financing arrangement for that solar project.
Is that typically an individual, or is it corporations, or?
Very good question. Very good question. 3/4 of the time, it's an individual. or a family, a husband and wife team, couples. Sometimes it is a company like a C Corp or a limited liability partnership. So it could be, it could be a company that is closely held corporation where maybe a handful of people own the company, or maybe it's a family that owns the company, and they decided that this is a priority, that they would like to sponsor a solar project in their place of business, whether it's inside of their town, for a school, or for a fire department, or for a church or a library. But other times it could be that they want to support solar wherever you have a receptive audience, and it could be outside of their area too.
So the other, which has nothing to do with tax sponsors, the other question that I had here is at the time of buyout. So you talked about 6 years being an optimal time to do that. What kind of dollars are we talking about versus when the whole project starts?
Okay, let's say you have a solar project that is fairly modest sized and it costs $25,000. Well, after tax credit depreciation and after 5 years, the value of that solar array, the fair market value that could be bought out, would be roughly half. And so, if it's a $100,000 project, like a big project for a big roof, $100,000 in year 5 or year 6, it's likely that the church, library, or school could pay $50,000 to buy out that originally $100,000 project. So it's a significant savings, but it's a deferred ownership. You have to wait. There's a deferred ownership system that means that along the way you're making payments, but those payments you would have been making to your electric utility anyways. So it's just now you're making a smaller payment to your electric utility, and you're making the rest of that payment to the solar tax sponsor for the first 6 years, and then you have the option to buy out after that.
And what's the advantage of buying out the tax sponsor and being the owner yourself?
The advantage is as you move forward in time, from year 6, you have 19 years left on the warranty on your solar panels, that you get to keep all of the energy savings. You don't have to share them with any other stakeholders because you are the owner and you're in control of it. That's the main benefit. There's also benefit for maybe not being the main owner, and that would be lower capital investment, lower risk for having to spend money on upgrades or buying new inverters at a certain point, which could happen between year 12 and year 20. You may need to replace the inverter. And so you have to take on those responsibilities if you become the sole owner.
Are you basically working with nonprofit type organizations?
We work with, by and large, nonprofits cannot access the solar tax credit.
Right.
So that just by virtue of that fact, we do work a lot with nonprofits, but we also work with cooperatives. As I mentioned earlier, cooperatives do pay a federal income tax if they don't have expenses that exceed their revenue. And so we work with co-ops, we work with municipalities, we work with not-for-profits, but we also work with farms. If you know any farmers, chances are they've spent a lot of money on farming equipment. And when you spend money on farming equipment, that means that you get to write down the expense of that against what you owe the federal government. So there's a lot of milk producers out there who won't owe taxes for a long time because they're basically depreciating all of hundreds and thousands of dollars of equipment over time. So they really don't have the tax appetite in which to use the tax credit. So we work with nonprofits, for-profits, churches, libraries, schools, co-ops.
So there's no limitation.
There's really no limitation.
Okay.
Yes.
You had commented about legacy offering the potential for financing up to 50%, I think you said. Can you give an idea of ceiling on that amount of 50% and what the general terms kind of typically look like?
Sure. So our bond, so this gets into the basically behind the scenes on how our financing works. And as a member-owned cooperative, we try to be as transparent as possible with our members, because if you're a member and you want to buy bonds, we will pay you 3% up to 3.5% if you under certain conditions. Now we'll turn around and we'll make a loan to the tax sponsor. It's going to be at least 5%. So we'll have a 1.5 percentage point margin, basically to cover our costs and transaction and that sort of thing. And usually those loans are at 12 years. So even though the ideal buyout opportunity happens in year 6, we amortize those loans over 12 years so that the loan payment, the servicing of that loan, is more or less the same or lower than what you are getting in revenue from your nonprofit. So everybody makes a little bit of margin along the way, and it's just that when you are buying out, if you have a loan and you're a tax sponsor, you need to declare the amount of that loan that is forgiven because of that buyout, if the tax sponsor or if the bondholder happens to be that church or library or school. So anyways, yeah, all of that is considered gain by the federal government and is taxable. So we figure that out with you, with your CPA, with your tax accountant, make sure everybody is on the same page and you understand what is expected.
And my other question is, I don't remember the names of the 2 contractors that you guys partner with. On their product lines at all, do they have more of a, let's just call it non-traditional panel, and have more of the newer generation of actual shingles and tiles?
Right.
Like Tesla has out there, or some other companies that are offering. They just look,
Good question.
They look nicer.
Good question. It's all about supply and demand. And the demand for those newer products that make really good videos and really good presentations and media splashes, especially from Tesla, the demand is currently, and probably for a few years yet, will outstrip the supply. But it's possible that one of our many member vendors could get access to that, but there might be a 1, 2, or 3 year waiting list, depending on the type of material that you're looking to buy.
Can I take that question?
Oh, yeah.
So the one thing
Elise
you
knows.
want to consider with tiles and those more shingle type looking things is that sometimes the flashier that an array looks, and if you're just looking at it purely from kind of a looks perspective, is that every interconnection that you have, the more connections that you have, the more breakage points you have for failure. So individual shingles like that are going to be, so the most failure that systems have is not through the panels themselves, it's through the things like the inverters, where those points of interconnection are. So you want to be careful of some of those emerging technologies, because they look more like what we expect roofs to look like, because they have that shingled, that tiled effect. But how they convert in working and efficiency is not showing the same efficiency level as the module types. Just
Good point. Yes, so buyer beware, especially with those new products. I mean, if some people are they're early adopters. I used to be an early adopter, but now that I'm older, I'm a little bit like, well, I don't know if it makes sense for me. I'm gonna, make my decision based on the newest information. But yes, by and large, the solar technology that 99% of our customers deal in is a mature technology. It's been around for a long time, and it has proved itself worthy of that kind of investment. So any other questions? It's been a delight and an honor to speak with you all. Please contact us. Feel free to reach out by email or phone. And thank you very much. And thank you, Colin and
Leave it
Lena. Thank you, Lena.
You look like.
And thank you, everybody from the Dane County Credit Union for allowing us to speak to you today.
Absolutely, great, thank you.
Email you August 1.